This episode contains mature themes. AI technology is used to enhance the listening experience. Listener discretion is advised. The quiet facade of a suburban home on Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York, concealed a darkness that would soon spill into the world. Inside, 6 members of the DeFeo family lay dead, each shot as they slept, their lives stolen in the stillness of the night. The house stood silent, heavy with the weight of blood and fear. But the horror did not end there. 1 year later, a new family moved in, only to flee in terror after 28 days, abandoning everything they owned. What they left behind was a legend of darkness, a story that would become one of the most chilling and disputed hauntings in American history. This is the story of the Amityville Horror. Welcome to 3 Theories, the podcast where we uncover the great mysteries of the world. I'm Elena Hart, your guide on this journey through the unknown. Each episode will examine unsolved cases, paranormal phenomena, and historical and natural mysteries, and explore 3 compelling theories to help you decide, what do you believe? The house at 112 Ocean Avenue was impossible to miss. A sprawling Dutch colonial with its sharply peaked roofline and distinctive quarter-moon windows staring out like watchful eyes, it loomed over the quiet tree-lined street in Amityville, New York. Neighbors described it as a place that seemed just a little too still, as if it were always holding its breath. On the outside, it was a picture of suburban calm, neat lawn, trimmed hedges, a family home. On the inside, something unthinkable was about to unfold. On the night of November 13th, 1974, 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr. picked up a .35 caliber Marlin rifle and moved room by room through the house. His parents, Ronald Sr. and Louise, were shot as they slept in their bed. Then he went to his brothers and sisters, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew, each gunned down in turn. The shots rang out through the night, deafening blasts that should have awakened the house. Yet strangely, none of the neighbors reported hearing anything more than muffled bangs, sounds they chalked up to a distant car backfiring or kids setting off fireworks. Inside, none of the victims stirred. Each one was found face down in their beds, positioned as if they had been carefully arranged after death. Police and medical examiners were left deeply unsettled. There were no defensive wounds, no signs that anyone had tried to run. No neighbors had called for help. No one heard screaming. How could 6 people be shot in their sleep without a single struggle? Some speculated they had been drugged, though toxicology reports found nothing unusual in their systems. The mystery of that silence has never been solved. When questioned, Ronald Jr., known as Butch, first claimed the murders were the work of a hitman tied to the mob. His story shifted repeatedly, from blaming his sister Dawn to insisting voices had driven him to kill. Eventually he confessed, though the details of his accounts changed so often that truth and invention blurred. He was convicted of 6 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison, where he would later spin even more contradictory versions of the night. The DeFeo house stood empty for a year. Locals whispered about it, crossing the street rather than passing too close. Even without a haunting, it carried the weight of blood-soaked history. And then, in December 1975, a new family arrived. George and Kathy Lutz purchased the property for a price far below market value. They knew about the murders, but they were also a young couple with 3 children and hopes of building a life together. Kathy was a mother of 3 from a previous marriage, while George ran a land surveying business. They moved in just before Christmas, bringing their belongings and high expectations. What they couldn't know was that they would flee in less than a month, abandoning everything. From the very first night, the Lutz family reported strange phenomena. George said the house felt oppressive, as though the walls themselves carried a charge. Cold spots appeared in random places, chilling to the bone even with the heat on. Doors opened and slammed shut on their own. Rooms would suddenly reek of foul odors. Sulfur, decay, the stink of something rotting. In midwinter, swarms of flies appeared in the sewing room, buzzing in thick clusters on the windows. Every night, at precisely 3:15 a.m., George would wake, drenched in sweat, compelled to look out toward the boathouse. Later, he learned that the murders had taken place around the same time. Sleep-deprived and irritable, he began chopping wood obsessively, feeding the fire with endless logs, as if something inside demanded it. His appearance changed. His eyes grew hollow, his temper sharp. Kathy would later claim she saw his face shift before her eyes, morphing into something cruel, inhuman. Kathy herself described terrifying experiences. She had vivid nightmares of the murders, waking with scratches and bruises she couldn't explain. One night, she claimed she felt an unseen presence lift her from the bed and hurl her to the floor. At other times, she swore she saw shadows move against the walls when no one else was there. The children were not spared. Their daughter Missy spoke of an imaginary friend named Jody, not a child, but a pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. Jody, she said, came to her at night and promised she would never leave. George claimed he once saw the creature outside, its massive shape standing in the snow, eyes blazing red through the darkness. Other disturbances built over the weeks. A crucifix on the wall rotated slowly upside down. A slime-like substance, green and viscous, seeped from keyholes and walls. Doors ripped from hinges. Furniture shifted. Even the family dog refused to enter certain rooms, growling and snarling at empty corners. By the end of their stay, George and Kathy described the house as suffocating, its energy growing darker each day. The breaking point came late one January night. They never detailed everything that happened, but said the atmosphere turned violent. Doors banging, unseen hands pushing, an overwhelming sense of evil pressing in on them. Grabbing the children, they fled into the freezing night. They never returned. The Lutz family left everything behind. Clothing in drawers, toys on the floor, food still in the fridge. They sold the house back to the bank, moving far away and refusing to go inside again. Their account of those 28 days would become one of the most famous haunting stories in the world. News of their ordeal spread quickly. Paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren were called in. The Warrens declared the house plagued by a demonic presence, citing cold blasts of air, unexplained noises, and one infamous photograph taken during their investigation. A childlike figure peering from a darkened hallway, even though no children were present. From there, the story exploded. Author Jay Anson's book, The Amityville Horror, became a bestseller, followed by films that cemented the tale in popular culture.
house at 112 Ocean Avenue became a legend, drawing believers, skeptics, and thrill seekers. And yet, questions linger.
Later owners of the house reported no unusual activity at all. Some called the Lutz story a fabrication. Others suggested the family was genuinely traumatized, even if the cause was psychological rather than paranormal. Still, others insist the house itself holds something darker, a force that only reveals itself to certain people. To this day, the question lingers. What really happened inside that house? The most grounded explanation for what happened at 112 Ocean Avenue is psychological, not supernatural. The Lutz family, after all, walked knowingly into a house where 6 people had been slaughtered in their sleep. That knowledge alone could have been enough to poison every creak of the floorboards, every gust of winter wind rattling the windows. Living day after day in a place where entire lives were extinguished can weigh on the mind like a shadow that never lifts. George Lutz, by many accounts, was the most vulnerable to that shadow. He had a rigid personality, controlling by nature, and had shown interest in the occult long before moving into the house. Once inside, he seemed to unravel. He grew fixated on the property, obsessively chopping wood, tending the fire until the flames roared through the night, as if he were feeding not just the hearth, but something that demanded to be kept alive. Kathy, too, reported vivid nightmares of the murders. Visions so real, she would wake screaming, convinced she had relived the killings herself. Stress and suggestion can create powerful illusions. Psychologists argue that the human mind, when primed with expectation, can transform ordinary events into terrifying experiences. A cold draft becomes the icy brush of a hand. The groan of settling wood sounds like a door slamming shut. Even George's nightly wakings at 3:15 a.m. could have been an anxious mind searching for patterns, attaching significance where none existed. The fact that he knew the approximate time of the DeFeo murders may have planted the seed, making coincidence feel like destiny. It is true that old houses breathe and shift. Winter brings flies in strange numbers, clinging to the warmth of a window pane. Strange odors seep from aging pipes. A mind under pressure, burdened with knowledge of past violence, can interpret these things as signs of the uncanny. And when one member of a household becomes convinced, fear has a way of spreading like infection. Kathy's bruises, George's hollow-eyed obsession, the children's strange stories of their imaginary friend, all could be explained by a family spiraling together into shared hysteria. And yet, something doesn't quite settle. Stress and suggestion might explain a creak in the floorboards, but would they be enough to drive an entire family from their home in less than a month? Would ordinary anxieties be enough to make them abandon clothing, toys, food still sitting on the table, and never once look back? The Lutz family wasn't simply unnerved. They fled, terrified, as though something inside the house had pressed too hard against the edges of their sanity. If it was only the mind playing tricks, then those tricks were crueler, sharper, and far more relentless than what most families could endure. Fear may have been enough to warp their reality, but if fear alone was responsible, why has no other family since reported anything remotely similar? The silence of later years makes the psychological explanation feel incomplete, like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Which leaves another possibility, one colder, more calculated. If the haunting cannot be entirely explained away by stress, was it something else entirely? A fabrication, deliberately built for profit and fame? If the Amityville Horror wasn't born from stress and suggestion, perhaps it was something far less mysterious. A lie. Some investigators, skeptics, and even people close to the Lutz family have long argued that the haunting was a carefully crafted hoax, a story spun for money, fame, or both. Consider the timing. The Lutzes abandoned the house in January 1976, and within weeks, they were in talks with writers, lawyers, and paranormal investigators. Soon after, the book The Amityville Horror was underway, followed by movies, sequels, documentaries, and merchandise. The family's story was immortalized, and the tale of 112 Ocean Avenue transformed from local tragedy into global legend. The speed with which the story became commercialized raises an unsettling question. Did the Lutzes ever intend to stay in the house? Or was their departure always part of a larger plan? There are details that lend weight to the idea of fabrication. Their attorney, William Weber, later claimed he helped concoct parts of the haunting during a night of drinking and brainstorming. According to him, the tales of blood seeping from the walls, demonic voices, and ghostly swarms of flies were embellishments designed to create a marketable story. If Weber's confession is true, then perhaps the Amityville Horror was never about terror. It was about business. But even if profit was the motive, not all the Lutz family members seemed equally complicit. George and Kathy were the primary voices, appearing in interviews and detailing the horrors of their brief stay. The children, on the other hand, were quieter, their accounts filtered through adult retellings. Some later spoke out, contradicting elements of the original tale, suggesting embellishment, memory distortion, or even outright invention. Still, a hoax requires not just lies, but consistency. And here, the story begins to crack. If George and Kathy truly invented everything, why abandon their possessions, their home, and their peace of mind? Why live in financial strain afterward instead of enjoying the spoils of fame? The royalties from the book and films were significant, but so were the lawsuits, the accusations, and the endless scrutiny. A deliberate hoax might have promised wealth, but it delivered notoriety and years of bitter disputes. And then there are the details that remain stubbornly eerie. Independent visitors to the house, reporters, paranormal investigators, even neighbors, described an atmosphere that felt oppressive and strange. While the Lutzes may have exaggerated, could every last story truly have been a fabrication? Could a family of 5, under constant questioning, maintain a facade that elaborate without letting the mask slip? The hoax theory provides a neat, rational solution. The Amityville Horror was nothing more than fiction, packaged as truth. But when you strip away the layers of skepticism, one thing remains difficult to ignore: the raw terror in George and Kathy's eyes in interviews. the lingering unease that clings to their words. Even if money and fame were motivators, was that fear entirely false? And if it wasn't, if even a shred of what they described was real, then we are left staring into a darker possibility. Not psychology, not profit, but something beyond explanation, something that whispered in the silence of that house and marked the Lutz family forever. Which brings us to our final theory, that the Amityville Horror was not a trick of the mind or a human invention, but a genuine haunting, a brush with the paranormal. For those who believe in forces beyond the veil of the ordinary, the Amityville Horror stands as one of the most disturbing cases in American history. If the Lutz's story was not the product of stress or fabrication, then perhaps it was exactly what they claimed: a true haunting, born from the violence that soaked into the walls of 112 Ocean Avenue. Some say a house can absorb suffering, that trauma leaves an imprint, a kind of spiritual scar that lingers long after the bodies are gone. If that is true, then the DeFeo murders provided fertile ground for something sinister to take root. 6 lives extinguished in an instant, each victim forced to die face down, silent and still. Investigators puzzled over why no one screamed, no one fought back. It was as though something unseen had already pinned them down. That eerie stillness might have been more than a mystery of human behavior. It could have been the first hint of a dark presence already alive inside the home. When George and Kathy Lutz moved in with their children, believers say they did not step into an ordinary house, but into a trap. From the very first night, they described an atmosphere that seemed to press in on them, a heaviness that no open window or blazing fire could lift. The strange cold spots, the unseasonal swarms of flies, the unseen force that woke George at precisely 3:15 a.m. All of these echo the hallmarks of what demonologists describe as infestation, the earliest stage of a haunting. And then there were the children. Kathy reported that her daughter Missy spoke to an imaginary friend named Jody, a pig-like creature with glowing red eyes. Harmless fantasy, perhaps, until George and Kathy claimed to see those same eyes themselves, staring from the darkness, watching them through the windows. When multiple witnesses describe the same impossible vision, the line between imagination and reality begins to blur. The disturbances escalated until they became violent. Doors ripped from hinges. Kathy discovered scratches across her body she could not explain. George grew gaunt and hollow-eyed, consumed by rage and obsession, chopping wood as though compelled by some unseen command. In one of the most chilling accounts, Kathy claimed she woke to find George levitating above the bed, his face distorted into a monstrous snarl, eyes black and unrecognizable. If true, such a moment suggests something beyond psychology, something clawing at the threshold of possession. When the Warrens arrived to investigate, their verdict was clear. The house was not merely haunted, it was infested with a demonic force. Lorraine Warren described a crushing sense of evil, a darkness so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. For her and others, Amityville was not a story of exaggeration or suggestion. It was proof of the demonic made manifest. Yet the house itself remains standing. Families have lived there since without reporting the same horrors, as though whatever once dwelled within has either gone dormant or found new prey. But the question lingers like a chill in the dark. Did George and Kathy Lutz truly encounter evil, or did they unknowingly invite it in? And perhaps the most terrifying thought of all is this: if the Amityville Horror was real, then such forces are not confined to that house on Ocean Avenue. They could be anywhere, waiting, watching. Thank you for joining us on this episode of 3 Theories. The Amityville Horror remains one of the most infamous mysteries in modern American history. Were the Lutz family driven to the edge by psychological strain, their fear twisting ordinary events into something terrifying? Was it all an elaborate hoax, carefully crafted to exploit tragedy and profit from the macabre? Or did they truly face a malevolent force inside 112 Ocean Avenue, a haunting born of bloodshed that refused to let go? What do you believe? Visit 3theoriespodcast.com for resources, documents, and additional reading to help you form your own conclusions. Share your thoughts with us on social media and join the conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Join us next time as we investigate another haunting case and present 3 more theories for you to consider. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction.